add value to your business, or do you want to just be this administrative person?
And often, if you look at your talent team and the caliber of talent in your company, they correlate.
You could hire the best person for the job if they were in your candidate pool.
All these individual employees, one by one, together, their voices all come together to articulate the culture of the company.
51%, half of the people at your organization are either looking or open to new jobs. So why aren't you trying to capture them?
The best decisions in recruiting are often those led by data. Joining us now, we're going to have some insights from the phenomenal Vice President of Talent Acquisition, Engagement, and Retention Research on some of the findings about the High Impact Talent Acquisition Report from 2018. Hello, hello, hello. This is Sean Simmerly, your host of Hiring on All Cylinders, coming at you from Market Street in San Francisco. We are at the inaugural Recruiting Automation Summit, and the guests just keep coming. The next one I'm incredibly excited for many reasons. The first is that 2 years ago at HR Tech in Chicago, I had the pleasure of speaking with this esteemed guest and got so much insight from it that I was scribbling down notes right as she walked in today because I knew that this was going to be a good conversation. So sitting opposite me right now is none other than Robin Erickson. Robin is the Vice President of Talent Acquisition, Engagement, and Retention Research at Bersin by Deloitte. And so she knows a thing or two about this space that we call home. Robin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sean. It's a pleasure to be here and very excited to be at Intello's inaugural Recruiting Automation Summit.
Awesome. Okay, well, there is so much to cover, so I'm going to jump right in and ignore the nice chit-chat about the beautiful weather we're having. And I just want to start with, so you and your team have released the 2018 High Impact Talent Acquisition Report. Is that correct?
Yes. We actually released a series of reports focused on high impact talent acquisition, but that was just in January. In January.
Okay. So what exactly did that entail? How many people? What was the scope? And talk me through kind of what that report really found.
Well, first of all, I want to fill you in on the fact that Deloitte's Global Human Capital Trends report in 2017 found that talent acquisition and employee experience were numbers 3 and 4 in terms of the top 10 HR priorities.
Okay.
So talent acquisition was 81%, employee experience was 79%, only slightly down from organization of the future and careers and learning.
Absolutely.
I was thrilled by that because it means that talent acquisition and the employee experience, which starts with talent acquisition, the candidate experience, is definitely high on the minds of all of the CEOs of all of the organizations. So we did a survey. It was an online survey. We had 1,220 respondents. Yes, we were very, very proud of that number. And so all of you who have children, I know the alphabet is very important, but our most important letter was N because our N was 1,220. I'm also proud of the fact that 55% of our respondents were from the Americas, meaning that 45% were from EMEA and APAC. So I'm thrilled that our research is global. Not only that, but we have data from organizations of many different sizes.
Yeah.
A great cross-section of organization size. We have data from all the industries. We also have 55% of HR leaders who took our survey, and an additional 18% were from TA. So this data is really well suited to talent acquisition and HR, but also the majority of our respondents were above the level of a manager. So they knew what was happening in their organizations. Yeah. So I'm just really thrilled to have that rigorous of a methodology and background to say that the statistics I'll be sharing with you today come from that survey.
Fabulous. So I guess then I will go ahead and jump into some of those and ask you, what are some of the outcomes of high impact talent acquisition?
Exactly. Why should you invest in it? Because it does take money to have a high impact talent acquisition function.
No kidding.
So we have multiple outcomes, but one that's really interesting for businesses, we found that those organizations that have a mature talent acquisition function compared to the low maturity ones are 2.4 times more likely to innovate.
Wow.
Which fits in very nicely with the theme of the conference here, recruiting automation. In terms of the workforce, they're 3.2 times more likely to supply top talent. And isn't that the goal of every single talent acquisition function, to supply top talent, finding the right people with the right skills at the right time? And third, we actually did some objective research on any companies in our survey that had publicly available financial data We looked at their levels of maturity compared to their objective publicly available financial data.
Sure.
And we found that those higher impact talent acquisition functions have 30% more profit per employee.
That's not insignificant.
That is not insignificant and provides a really good business case for investing in your talent acquisition function.
And that's getting that proverbial seat at the table for the talent acquisition function.
That's a little cliche. I actually heard a better phrase than that, getting elbows on the table.
I like it.
Not just a seat,
Sure.
but elbows on the table.
Leaning in. Yeah.
Leaning in, exactly.
Okay. Fabulous. So the return is there. The profit is there. So I guess, kind of talking about, again, we're at this summit that's all about recruiting automation. Were there any findings in particular that were kind of in relation or in terms of automation when it comes to the talent acquisition function?
There were. And obviously, when you're looking at any type of survey data, you're looking for those differences, right?
Sure.
Some of the biggest differences came about in terms of technology.
Great.
So first of all, those high-performing talent acquisition functions, those at the highest level of maturity, are 6 times more likely to engage in database decision-making. So big data is real, and organizations need to have an analytics strategy and team, and they need to be using that data predictively.
Yeah. It's not just about having the data, it's about actually acting and analyzing and interpreting that data to be effective.
Correct. And using it to forecast your headcount, using it to build your talent acquisition strategy, which, by the way, that's another topic.
Yeah.
But if you don't have one, you should have one.
Fabulous. Okay, great. And sorry, I kind of cut you off.
Nope, that's
what are
fine.
some other findings there?
Some other findings are those high-performing TA functions are 6 times more likely to leverage predictive data when developing their talent acquisition strategy.
Okay.
So it's a number 6 for both of those. They're 6 times more likely to engage in database decision-making and 6 times more likely to use that predictive data when developing their TA strategy. We also found that those high-performing talent acquisition functions are 4 times more likely to embed advanced talent acquisition technologies such as cognitive tools and AI. And the usage of cognitive tools and AI is actually fairly nascent in talent acquisition. And there are a lot of companies who, it's very much a buzzword. There's a lot of companies who are talking about how they're doing and what they're doing with it. And we found that, it definitely was a differentiator. The usage of AI and cognitive tools was definitely a differentiator at the higher levels of maturity.
Yeah.
And then last, but definitely not least, we found that those high-performing TA functions were 2 times more likely to innovate, test new processes, tools, capabilities, and training. So they are really focusing in on trying to make themselves better and aspiring for a higher level of maturity.
Yeah, and trying to iterate, trying to say, okay, status quo is status quo. Let's actually not just have our elbows on the table. Let's actually be participating. Let's lead that conversation.
Exactly.
Very cool. Okay. Gosh. Okay. So can we walk through some of the data that was actually present in all those findings? Like, kind of talk to me about what that really looks like for TA leaders today.
I'd be happy to. We actually have 6 findings from the study. Obviously, they encompass a broad range of things, but I'll go through them one at a time.
Okay.
The first finding is that high-impact talent acquisition teams build the workforce of the future through integration with the business, integration with strategy, career development, and culture. So it's all about integration, and it's that getting the elbows on the table, as we talked about. But it's important that talent acquisition is not standalone. In many organizations, there are multiple applicant tracking systems. Talent acquisition is done differently in different parts of the U.S. They're not standardized. So, not only is it important to make sure that your talent acquisition team is visible, but it's also very important to prioritize the relationship between your recruiters and your hiring managers. And that should really be a partnership. In terms of data, we found that 2/3 of the high-performing talent acquisition functions report significant integration with talent management.
Interesting. And what would you define as being significant integration?
So in many organizations, the talent acquisition data doesn't tie to performance data, doesn't tie to learning data. And so when people talk about quality of hire, they're actually talking about quality of candidate or quality of new hire, because they're sending an email to the hiring manager and saying, how is this candidate? Would you hire them again?
Yeah.
Well, they've barely learned their way around the office and what their job is at that point.
Sure.
If you really want to be integrated, you're going to have your talent acquisition data integrated with your performance management data. and see how successful they are. And then if you have it integrated with learning and career, then you can actually make huge strides in the next finding that I'm excited to talk about. It's my favorite finding on internal mobility.
Ooh.
So can I go on to that finding?
Yes, please. Yes.
All right. Well, it is my favorite finding. And organizations are really finding internal mobility to be a challenge. Most companies don't do it well. And for years, it's been easier for some people to quit a job, quit a company, and then come back, hire back in another role.
Yeah, boomerang.
Just because it's so hard to navigate within the organization.
Sure.
There's also the issue that in many organizations, their culture doesn't support internal mobility, because why should a business manager want his best talent to go do something else? But they don't realize, though, they're very short-sighted, because their best talent's not going to wait for them to leave or die.
No.
I mean, in some cases, that's your only choice.
Yeah.
So they're going to go someplace else. 51% of Americans, according to Gallup, have their foot out the door, which means 51%. Half of the people at your organization are either looking or open to new jobs. So why aren't you trying to capture them?
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about retention from, keep everybody. I actually agree with, those who believe that you should get rid of your bottom 5% every year. You need new employees to increase your diversity, increase your innovation levels, and bring in other experiences. But the high-performing talent acquisition functions are 5 times more likely, again, big number, to deploy a strategic approach to internal mobility. And 76% of those organizations at the highest level of maturity agree that they tap internal pools of talent regularly. This is very different from those organizations where many organizations, the recruiters only process people. They're not allowed to go and say, hey, I have a great job, would you be interested? Not only that, but if you're an ambitious employee and you've applied for another job within the organization many times, nobody's coming alongside that person and saying, well, here's the learning that you need. Here's how you can move your career and get there. So talent acquisition needs to partner with career management and with learning to create career paths and discussions about mobility within the organization. And it might include leaving the organization and coming back with new skills. So that's sort of that, employee for life concept.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, so, at Intello, like our Intello sales development team is kind of that exact same situation, right? I mean, we're working with new grads, people that are just kind of entering the professional workforce. And so much of it is trying to partner with other heads of department and say like, okay, let's develop the skills that are going to get you into, marketing, going to get you into customer success, going to get you into product.
Right.
And if you can actually create those relationships, all of a sudden the intention of, sticking around and adding value, it's just exponentially explodes.
Well, and there's many different benefits of actually moving people around within your organization. They require almost no orientation or onboarding. They already know your organization. They've been through your performance management process, for better or worse. That's another podcast, but
definitely.
You know that they're a good performer, but not only that, they've chosen your culture, your organization. They like where they're at. They like the people. They like the commute. They want to be at your organization. And so really, rather than having a revolving door of employees, think about what you can do to make your organization a place where people will want to stay and build their career. And it's a great employment brand differentiator.
Yeah. I can see why that is one of your favorite findings from the report.
We actually have an article coming out in July in the Deloitte Review, which is comes out twice a year, and it will be available on Deloitte.com.
Wonderful.
But it's all about internal mobility and the importance of talent acquisition working with career management and learning.
Wonderful. That is a phenomenal finding. Thank you for finding that for us.
It was a surprise.
Yeah.
I mean, really, we had one question specifically around how effective is your internal mobility, and it was statistically significant. We had 11 different items in our survey that were statistically significant, and the one that was the biggest surprise was around internal mobility.
I guess I need to start talking to other business leaders.
Or at least reading my reports.
I can start there, Robin. Okay, so that was your favorite. What are some of the other findings?
Some of the other findings. The third finding is around strategic sourcing, and the idea that those organizations at the high level of talent acquisition maturity are not just looking at past skills and experiences. They're also interviewing for candidates' work ethic, for their values, and their potential. Hard to do. I completely realize that. In fact, people have said to me, well, how do you do it? I said, well, the only 2 ways I can think of so far are predictive predictive assessments, pre-hire assessments, and behavioral interviewing.
Yeah.
If you have other ideas, any of your listeners, please reach out to me.
You heard her.
Erickson at Deloitte.com.
There it is.
I would love to know. But again, just in terms of the statistics, 92% of those organizations at the highest level of maturity encourage hiring for long-term potential. Because they're hoping, it ties back in with the last finding on internal mobility. If you're hiring people for long-term potential, then they can move around within the organization.
And it's so expensive to hire new individuals. I mean, not just from the sheer dollars up front, but just from the investment in time and effort and energy and coordinating all of that from a hiring perspective. It's insane.
Well, and 2 years ago, we talked about the report I'd written on the surprising cost of voluntary turnover.
Yep.
And the ROI of retention, which is that no company actually calculates the lost productivity when they're looking at the cost of voluntary turnover.
And it can be massive.
So the cost of attrition, especially now that unemployment is so low, voluntary turnover is very high. Organizations need to be thinking about this.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a strong finding.
The fourth finding is around personalizing the talent journey and making sure that you are strengthening your employment brand, strengthening that candidate experience. So looking at the experience through a candidate's eyes, through an employee's eyes. Candidate experience has been increasing in importance over the last few years. In fact, many organizations actually apply to see if they can win a CANDY award, which is a Candidate Experience Award. In terms of, I mean, also many organizations measure the candidate experience, but you shouldn't just be measuring the candidate experience of the people you hire. You need to be measuring the candidate experience of the people you don't hire.
The silver medalist,
Well, not only that, but if you're a service company and if you have a bad experience with a company when you apply for a job, why would you ever buy anything from them, shop at their stores, do anything with them, fly their airlines, any of those things? Why would you do it?
Yeah. I hard struck to find an answer for that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not only that, so candidate experience expectations are higher than they have ever been before.
Yeah.
And not only that, but we're used to rating things. Every time you go to get your car fixed or you
Uber, take a
anything,
ride.
exactly. You're rating everything, and people are expecting to be able to provide feedback on the experiences they have. So in terms of some data I'll share, 76% those organizations at the top level of maturity actually communicate with all candidates, both selected and those who aren't selected.
I wish that was around 5 years ago, 10 years ago. That'd be great when I was first applying to jobs.
Well, and that's the other thing too. Just think about candidate experience in the same way you think about your customer experience. Organizations know almost everything about their customers. They've been using data to find things out about them for years. Why aren't you doing the same thing with your candidates, with the people who might be joining your organization?
Yeah. And, it's really encouraging that the trend is moving towards focusing on that experience. And I mean, so many of the vendors in our space that are coming up, it's like that is the focus. It's like from every touch point, right? Whether you're talking about a passive candidate being reached out to by a recruiter, if you're talking about recruitment marketing platforms and nurture campaigns and making sure that they're feeling appreciated and getting insight into the process. I mean, and then all the way into, again, upper mobility and being able to transfer into other departments. That all correlates to, again, that expectation that you're mentioning. And it's great that it's trending that way.
It is. And so that's our fourth finding, is around personalizing the talent journey. In the interest of time, I will try to go a little bit faster. So the fifth one was a surprise to us as well. The fifth one is around the fact that it's important that you train your recruiters and your hiring managers. Because what's one of the first things that goes when a company is trying to save money or grow?
Yeah.
The investment in training just goes away.
Exactly.
And so remember I told you we had 11 items that were statistically significant?
Yeah.
2 of them were around training.
Wow.
One was around training, official training of your recruiters and your hiring managers. What are you telling them? How are you getting them ready to partner? Remember, we spoke about the importance of recruiters and hiring managers partnering.
Yep.
How are you getting them ready? Not just the compliance training, but how are you helping them to nurture candidates and get them through the process and that sort of thing?
Yeah.
The second finding, though, was just around the role of the talent acquisition function. What are you doing to increase the experiences and the exposure that your recruiters have? Or do they have information about the industry? Are they going to conferences? Are they getting specialized certifications in terms of recruiting, that sort of thing? Again, the high-performing TA functions are 4 times more likely to develop and coach their people. And it's overlooked. I mean, who
Yeah.
would have thought that one of the differentiators at a higher level is training?
Yeah.
But it is.
Yeah. And it all wraps back into that. Again, the surprising finding of like, oh yeah, upper mobility within the organization. It's like if you actually focus on development and training, all of a sudden new opportunities present themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Last but definitely not least,
Okay.
and most connected with our conference here,
All right.
mature talent acquisition functions use AI and predictive data to sharpen the TA function. And we debated long and hard about how to describe that. But
Yeah.
it really is around how do you make your talent acquisition function more automated? How do you make it more digital? How do you make it smarter, more efficient? I know there's a lot of concern with people that people have in recruiting that the robots are going to take their jobs. Well, you know what? The role of sourcers could go away theoretically. There is technology available to find people. However, technology is never going to be warm and fuzzy and convince someone to come work for your organization.
Exactly.
They're going to want to hear about the culture from an actual employee. They're going to want to hear multiple employees, right?
Yep.
They're going to want to meet the people they'd be working with.
Yeah. Get those reviews, see what other people are
Exactly.
thinking from a peer perspective.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's, I think the statement like sorcerers might eventually go away is scary. And I think it's not that individual is going away.
No,
but
it's not.
The sole responsibility of just plugging in a Boolean string on Google and doing
Correct.
an X-ray search, that may go away.
That might go away.
But all of a sudden that sorcerer can have more genuine conversations and talk about, oh my gosh, I am being developed here. I'm being groomed here. I'm growing. I'm expanding. And that's what people want to hear.
Yes, exactly. And so I don't just like when banks started using automated teller machines, ATMs. Everybody predicted the fall of banking. Well, there are actually more bank branches now than there were then. There's one on almost every corner. And yet it's automated. We don't think about, the fact that we don't often have to go into the bank just to get some cash.
Exactly.
So it's the same. I think it's going to be the same thing here. I think automation is going to drive workforce changes. I mean, we already have this huge change around whether or not people are working full-time, sort of the brick and mortar employees, or are they a gig worker? Are they a freelancer? Talent acquisition has long hired contractors.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we measure when we do our benchmarking research at Bersin is how many contractors do you have? But I think it's going to have to be expanded to how many part-time workers do you have?
Sure.
How are you using that open talent economy?
Yeah, it's fascinating, and that is a good point. That recruiting has historically used contractors at a really high clip.
Yes.
And do you see that increasing, decreasing? Like, what are some of the insights you've gleaned from that?
I see the mix of employees changing. It's already in progress. I just don't think people have talked about it enough.
Sure.
Another challenge for talent acquisition, which I haven't researched yet, but I want to, is by and large, procurement hires gig and contract workers, not talent acquisition.
What?
Exactly. And how are they being onboarded? How are they being trained? What's their performance management look like if you're a long-term contractor with an organization? Why isn't talent acquisition involved in trying to find the best gig worker or any of that? And so I think that needs to change. But I haven't done the research yet to prove it.
Yeah. Well, that's another piece regarding, I guess, strategy and talent acquisition. Figuring out how to connect those two.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we are coming up on our time, Robin.
I know.
I wish we could keep talking. So I think you'll have to come back and we'll have to do this again.
I would love to, Sean. Thank you so much for inviting me to do a podcast today.
Of course. All right, Robin. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Robin Erickson, again, the Vice President of Talent Acquisition, Engagement, and Retention Research at Bersin by Deloitte. It's been a pleasure and looking forward to the next time.